This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I really hope the Browns can pull this game out against the Saints and really pull out a strong second half of the season, because I think that the fan base needs it, and honestly the brand of the Cleveland Browns needs it. Like, a lot of people are fed up with this iteration of the Browns, and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, Paul DePodesta, and Jimmy Haslam haven't done a great job of retaining some public trust with this team, despite their relatively high level of success comparatively to what other Browns teams have, or Browns regimes have been able to accomplish. And I think that's something that they really ought to be aware of and really start to think about how they could address. But nonetheless, we are in the midst of the last practice of the Browns before they play the New Orleans Saints, and we don't have great news going into that game about one particular player. Michael Hall, he got injured at practice, I believe on Thursday, and it is unknown what the extent to that injury is, but what we do know is that he was immediately ruled out. The last time a player was immediately ruled out after sustaining an injury for the next game was JOK, and JOK ended up on injured reserve. Given that the Browns' main goal at the end of the season is to get some of their young players more involved, Michael Hall going down after missing so much time, but also showing so much promise this season, really is super unfortunate. Hopefully it's not a major injury and he can come back sooner than later, just so he can get the reps that he needs. And also, he's a quality player for this team. What that means for this game coming up, Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst will just step in more. Maybe you elevate Jawan Briggs off the practice squad and give him a chance. But I don't think it's really going to change what your game plan is coming into this game defensively. But that's the news on Michael Hall. Unfortunately, he's hurt, but there's more I want to talk about in this video. And what I really want to talk about in this video is what the Browns need to show going forward, right? What do they need to accomplish going forward? Because the Browns have a serious issue. I don't think the fans believe in this organization going forward right now. I think they have hit the lowest. Like, if they did approval ratings for coach, I'm pretty sure the Browns are at their lowest approval rating that they've been in quite some time. Not even just like the Hugh Jackson era, right? But like even going back before that, I feel like the approval for this regime right now is very low considering what they've been able to accomplish, right? Ken Dorsey, not Ken Dorsey. Kevin Stefanski is a two-time coach of the year. The Browns have won 11 games 2 times in the last, 4 years or something like that. Like, this team has been able to reach success that other regimes haven't. That being said, it hasn't been undeniable success. And they do have some quirks about them that I think rub people the wrong way, whether you agree with these people or not, right? And I think very often we fall into the trap of we don't agree with people who think Kevin Stefanski should be fired, or you don't agree with somebody who thinks Kevin Stefanski should keep their job, but you don't listen to the heart of the thing that they're complaining about. And look, I don't think Kevin and AB should be fired, but I do think that there's something to why so many people, despite the relative success, want him fired. And it's not just people are mad the team is 2-7, or people are linking him to the Deshaun Watson thing. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's a negative reaction to how the Browns operate. And I think that's why so many people have gone to pointing the finger at Paul DePodesta. And I think what Paul DePodesta kind of symbolizes to a lot of people is the mysterious nature of how the Browns handle things under this regime. Because if you look at this regime, Paul DePodesta is the most mysterious figure. You can blame him for anything and you can't find proof that it contradicted. You can say he didn't have anything to do with anything and you might be right on that as well. We don't know what Paul DePodesta does, but that's part of the problem, right? The Browns don't really do a good job of having transparency. They don't tell us what's going on, why they're doing things, right? Then sometimes you can't give us the answer. I understand, right? If we're talking about benching Deshaun and the reason you want to keep him out there is because you are doing the sunk cost fallacy thing, I understand you can't just go out there and say that, right? But there are things that you can say that would make people at least understand what you're trying to go for. But it seems like every plan that this organization does, it feels like they're doing it behind the fans' back. Even when it's stuff that you agree with, even when it's stuff that you don't agree with, it always feels subversive in a way. And I think that is something that they need to address. If you're going to have a sports team in the 21st century with online and everything else being as important as it is, I think transparency is necessary. And it's something that's important for a team to have. Right? Because if you are a transparent team, then that means these things that might be deemed as mysterious, that people can blame on a million different things, all of a sudden they have an official answer for. Right? If people want Paul DePodesta fired, I don't know if that's the right take or not, because I don't know what Paul DePodesta does. Right? And when nobody knows what Paul DePodesta does, then depending on who's saying something, Paul DePodesta does everything. You can make him a boogeyman. You can make him the man in charge of all of this and blame him for everything. You can say that this is Andrew Berry's fault or the Deshaun Watson trade is on Jimmy Haslam. Like, none of these things have any truth to it because we don't know what the truth is because they've been guarding that truth so long. There's no reason we don't know what the responsibilities day to day are of Paul DePodesta. That's ridiculous. Right? Like, we should know those kind of things. The media should really have that figured out at this point, right? But nobody knows what Paul DePodesta does. And I think part of it is nobody asks what Paul DePodesta does because it's funner to speculate on what Paul DePodesta does than to know the truth. The same thing can be said about, like, how involved is Jimmy Haslam in this? Like, we deserve some transparency on that. That's what bugs me about this regime is the lack of transparency and their move to more and more secrecy. And it's not just the Browns doing it. It's a lot of teams across the NFL doing it. And I don't care who it is. It could be Mike Tomlin. It could be John Harbaugh. It could be Kevin Stefanski. It could be Zach Taylor. Making your operation more secretive and hiding it from the fans is just a bad idea. Right? Because whether people want to admit it or not, fans do have a way of changing what the football operations does. Like, you can fight against it all you want if you're the Browns or any other organization, but the fans have power when it comes to that. Because if, let's say, the Browns want to go out here and say, we're going to start Deshaun Watson next year, what you're going to see is a lot of people who already haven't canceled their season tickets decide that they're going to cancel their season tickets. And that's going to create pressure from not just Jimmy, but JW and all the other, like, business side people that something has to happen. Like, if you don't continue to win games and this fan base continues to be in the dark place that it is until the off season, you're going to feel pressure financially because you're just going to see the enthusiasm for the Cleveland Browns fall off a cliff, and not just fall off a cliff, fall to levels that weren't really the case in, like, 2008 when the team was consistently mediocre. That's going to force somebody to say, hey, we got to change coaches just to get people re-engaged with this team. Because at the end of the day, the NFL is not a charity. I know it's a nonprofit, but it's not a charity. They're not doing this for our sake. They're doing this for business. And what the Browns have been doing, how the Browns have been operating, the secrecy behind it, all of this stuff. It hasn't been overwhelmingly great for the football, and it hasn't been great for business, and they have to switch that up. Now, what I want to see from this Browns team from the rest of the season is simple. If Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski want to keep their job, and specifically Kevin Stefanski, you have to make the argument on the field that your struggles this year had to do with Deshaun Watson playing much worse than anybody expected, right? We thought that there was a chance that Deshaun Watson could be like mid to mediocre this year, but we did not think Deshaun Watson would be the worst quarterback to play for the Browns since 2011. Nobody, even his biggest haters, did not anticipate that. So that's one thing that you can say, hey, nobody saw that coming. But if you then have a quarterback replace him and the results are still the same from the offense, now we're looking at you, right? Like a lot of the negative attention is on Watson, and I think deservedly so. He played very bad. But if you can't up these numbers with Jameis Winston, then all of a sudden it's not going to look like it was just Watson. It's going to look like, hey, maybe Kevin's part of the problem here, and that will get them to move off of Kevin, right? So what are the improvements specifically I need this team to get to? With Watson, they average a paltry 248 yards per game of offense, total offense, in 6.5 games. I need them to get that number up to 330. That won't put them at the top of the league, but that will put them in the middle of the league. So for the rest of the season, if we just count the Jameis starts, you need to be over 330 yards on average, right? By the end of the season in the Jameis starts. That would be a 75% increase. Also, you would have done that by playing a tougher schedule than you did the first few weeks. And if you do that, right, and you get that production by getting 30 more rushing yards, 50 more passing yards per game, if you're able to do that, then the case is obvious for what went wrong this season. Because I think that's the biggest thing you have to answer for this season. Why did it go so bad? Like, how did you go from a team that went 11-6 to this? What real reason is there for you doing that? A legitimate reason for that could be quarterback play much worse than we anticipated. That's a legitimate reason. And if you can make that argument for the rest of the year that, hey, even with somebody mediocre like Jameis Winston or Jacoby Brissett or Joe Flacco, right, all not starting level quarterbacks, but mediocre level quarterbacks who can do what you want to do offensively when it comes to that Stefanski style. If you can make the argument that you could play 500 or better football and have a middle-of-the-road offense with that kind of quarterback, then all of a sudden your problems don't seem so dire. It doesn't feel like you got to tear everything down. And it's just like, okay, we just got to figure out a way around this whole Deshaun Watson thing for the next couple of years because his contract ends in 2 years and he's coming off an Achilles injury. So he'll be partial for next year. So you got 2 years left of him. So for 2 years, you can work around Deshaun Watson. You can figure out what you need to figure out at the quarterback position, and you can move on as long as you present this case on the field. You got to be better offensively. Because if you're not better offensively, the argument for hopefulness for next year is dead. Because then it's all of a sudden, it's not just about getting a marginal improvement at quarterback play by switching to somebody who can at least be mediocre and cheap. This will be about, hey, you have giant problems on this team that need to be filled. Now, again, this team went 11-6. That would suggest, well, last year they went 11-6. That would suggest that you don't have giant problems on this team. Yes, the offensive line needs patched a little bit, obviously. I think they also just need to get healthy. I also think that quarterback play has been a huge problem for this team. Defensively, they're not as good as last year, but they're still pretty good defense. So you can patch all of this together if just the quarterback position is the issue, and you can figure out a way. Like if this team really has only one issue, and that's quarterback play, and let's say they make a move to somehow get Kirk Cousins off the Atlanta Falcons, then you're going to walk into next year feeling really good about your chances to make the playoffs at least, right, for the next couple of years. Maybe you draft somebody, develop them, and then who knows, by 2026, you're already moved on to a new quarterback era and you ready to do your thing. But that's what they need to prove this year. If Kevin cannot show and demonstrate that this offense can be significantly better than what they were to start the season with better execution at the quarterback position, then that's going to cost Kevin his job. That's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Peace.